There are Russian billionaires so powerful that even Putin dares not touch them. But the real danger isn't their wealth. It's how they've turned power into something no one can freeze. They don't flaunt supercars, wear fur coats, or appear in photos, because their true power hides in the food you eat, the roads you travel, and the data the world relies on. One man can send global wheat prices skyrocketing with a single click. Another commands a ghost warship that disappears from satellites within minutes. And one has made $29 billion vanish beyond the reach of any government. This isn't just a story about money. It's the untold truth of an invisible empire that controls the world from the shadows. Are you ready to uncover their secrets? In the world of Russian politics and finance, there exists a rare breed of billionaires. Men who have not only slipped beyond the Kremlin's control, but built invisible empires that stretch across the globe. They don't need to stand next to Putin or appear on state TV, because they wield something far more powerful than political influence. Economic leverage the world cannot live without. Unlike the typical oligarchs who flaunt super yachts, mansions, or football clubs, these men operate from the shadows. Dmitry Mazepin controls nearly 20% of the global fertilizer supply, a lifeline for the world's food chain, rendering sanctions almost meaningless. Andrei Melnichenko transformed his fortune into a ghost warship, a vessel capable of vanishing from satellite tracking and serving as a mobile command center beyond the reach of any government. Alexei Mordashov chose to disappear on paper, restructuring tens of billions of dollars in assets through a maze of legal transfers. Vladimir Lysin relies on encryption, isolated networks, and multinational trade structures to hide his steel empire from any radar. These men do more than evade sanctions. They render them powerless. Their influence doesn't exist within Russia's borders. It flows through contracts, data, supply chains, and markets that the global economy depends on every single day. This is not merely a story about wealth. It is the rise of a new kind of power, one that cannot be controlled, cannot be sanctioned, and cannot be erased. It is a power built not on land or armies, but on the invisible infrastructure that holds the modern world together. If Part 1 revealed how Russian billionaires escaped Putin's control, Part 2 shows how they transformed wealth into global power, a power that no longer depends on borders or governments. These men don't just protect their fortunes. They build mechanisms to manipulate markets, bypass laws, and shape the global economy itself. Andrei Melnichenko is a prime example. Instead of having his assets frozen, he turned his yacht into a mobile territory, a floating fortress capable of carrying people, data, and high-level negotiations beyond the reach of any state. Alexei Mordashov demonstrates another power strategy, disappearing on paper. By transferring shares through shell companies and offshore trusts, he maintains control while leaving no legal trace. Vladimir Lysin takes it further, using encryption, isolated networks, and blockchain to make his steel supply chain nearly invisible in the global system. Meanwhile, Roman Abramovich and Leonid Mikhelson reinvent themselves as unpredictable variables, diplomatic intermediaries, or architects of gas networks that no authority can fully regulate. What unites them all is the shift from visible to invisible power. Their influence is no longer tied to yachts, skyscrapers, or oil fields, but to legal architectures, supply chains, data, and technology, the unseen infrastructure the world relies on. In the post-sanctions era, power is no longer measured by the wealth you display, but by the systems you control, without anyone realizing it. Those who master these invisible flows don't just survive global pressure. They shape the geopolitical landscape and dictate the future course of nations. The final chapter of this story is not just about how Russian oligarchs survived sanctions. It's about how they created a nation without borders, that operates beyond the reach of traditional law and state power. When governments freeze assets, block accounts, or revoke visas, such actions mean little, because their real wealth no longer exists where it can be seized. Leonid Mikhelson proves this. Instead of relying on fixed pipelines, he built an entire fleet of LNG tankers capable of delivering gas worldwide without touching Western ports. Dmitry Mazepin turned the global fertilizer supply chain into a strategic weapon, forcing countries to weigh the impact on their own food security before sanctioning him. Roman Abramovich took a more elusive route, reinventing himself as a political variable, an informal intermediary in sensitive negotiations. Meanwhile, Igor Sechin, still deeply tied to the Russian state, demonstrates how visible power is losing ground to the soft power of capital, supply chains, and information. In the end, what they've built is more than wealth. It's a self-sustaining system beyond national jurisdiction. Money flows through layers of offshore entities. Control is embedded in contracts. Influence is coded into logistics networks that no regulator can fully trace. In this world, borders no longer define power. It is those who command the space between laws, the gaps where regulation cannot reach, who truly rule the 21st century. Their empires don't need armies or flags. They thrive in the invisible infrastructure that sustains the modern world, shaping its politics, its economies, and ultimately its future. Looking back at the entire picture, the most alarming truth is not the vast fortunes or complex financial networks these Russian billionaires have built. It's how they've redefined the very meaning of power in the 21st century. The world once believed power belonged to governments, armies, and nations with defined borders. Today, power can reside in anonymous contracts, global logistics networks, or encrypted data flows beyond any state's reach. Figures like Mazepin, Melnichenko, and Mikkelsen have proven that in a globalized world, those who control humanity's essential lifelines, energy, food, steel, and data, are the ones who truly rule. They don't need political backing, titles, or even a homeland. Their wealth and influence flow seamlessly across borders, like the currents of trade, law, and technology. This is the new generation of power, one that doesn't parade itself through armies or flags but exists in the invisible. Irreplaceable supply chains, uncontrollable financial systems, and the world's unavoidable dependencies. A person can be sanctioned, but a system designed to disappear cannot. And that is the ultimate lesson. 21st century power is no longer about who gives the orders. It's about who controls the things no one can see. These billionaires have mastered that art completely, creating empires that operate in the shadows, yet shape the destiny of nations. Their story is not just about survival, it's a warning. In a future defined by interdependence and invisibility, the most powerful forces will not be those standing on podiums, but those who control the unseen forces that keep the world alive. The story of Russia's billionaires does not end with evading sanctions or building power beyond the reach of the state. The final chapter reveals a deeper truth. They are rewriting the rules of the global game. When wealth is no longer tied to geography and power, no longer depends on politics, these men have turned themselves into mobile nations. Without borders, without armies, yet wielding influence greater than many governments. What's remarkable is that they don't need to attack or confront the West. They embed themselves into the systems the world cannot live without, from food and energy to steel and data. When every economy depends on these pillars, controlling them is equivalent to shaping the fate of nations. Sanctions become obsolete because while you can seize yachts or freeze bank accounts, you cannot sanction an entire supply chain or shut down a deeply integrated digital infrastructure. The ultimate message is clear. We are entering an era where power no longer belongs to those who own territory, but to those who control dependency. And when dependency becomes the foundation of global order, these billionaires are no longer just players. They are the ones writing the rules. Their empires represent a fundamental shift in how the world works, from visible to invisible power, from territorial control to systemic dominance. In this new reality, the future will not be shaped by borders or battles, but by the few who understand and command the invisible networks that keep our world running. As the world enters an era of deep globalization and rising geopolitical competition, the story of Russia's billionaires is more than a tale of wealth or influence. It is a warning to humanity. They have proven that in today's world, those who control what people depend on control everything. This doesn't only apply to energy, food, or steel. It now extends to data, artificial intelligence, supply chains, and technology. The strategies used by Mazepin, Mordashov, or Mikkelsen today may become the blueprint for future power players. In a world where laws lag behind reality, those who can move assets faster than sanctions, build networks more complex than regulators can track, and create ecosystems that cannot be replaced. These are the ones who will define the new order. Even more concerning is that this new form of power is accountable to no citizens or nations. It cannot be elected or overthrown. It doesn't belong to governments but to a small group of individuals clever enough to turn legal loopholes into strategic weapons. This final chapter is a reminder that the nature of power is shifting. It no longer resides in parliaments or armies, but hides within flows of capital, data, and supply chains. And if we fail to understand how these invisible empires operate, we may soon live in a world where governments no longer make the decisions, but billionaires behind the curtain do. This is not science fiction. It's the emerging reality of the 21st century, and it's unfolding right now. The final chapter of this journey is not just a conclusion. It is a forecast of the future of global power. As Russian billionaires build invisible empires beyond borders, they are not merely surviving sanctions. They are architects of a new order, where power is defined not by territory or weapons, but by the ability to manipulate the systems the world relies on. In the near future, the models they are creating will no longer be exceptions, but the new norm. Wealth will no longer sit in bank accounts, but in algorithms. Power will no longer reside in parliaments, but in supply chains. When a single individual can control the flow of energy, food, or data across the planet, they effectively hold the fate of billions, far beyond the reach of any government. This reality raises a profound question. Can laws, nations, and traditional institutions still regulate a power that is borderless and untethered? Or are we entering an era where the new players, stateless billionaires, will write the rules? The answer remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. The world we know is being transformed at its core. And if the 20th century was the age of nation-states, then the 21st century will be the age of invisible empires, where true power cannot be seen, yet it shapes everything around us. This is the dawn of a new world order, one not built on flags or armies, but on networks, dependencies, and the invisible hands that steer them. The story of Russia's billionaires is living proof of a powerful truth shaping the 21st century. Power no longer belongs to those who govern, but to those who control the world's dependencies. From food and energy to steel and data, everything society relies on to function can become a weapon of influence in the right hands. What's most alarming is that this power is invisible. It has no flag, no army, no public declaration, yet it can shape policies, trigger crises, or change the course of entire nations with a single strategic decision. The future is approaching fast, a world where the line between state and corporation, between politics and finance, blurs beyond recognition. And in that world, those who master the art of disappearing from the system while still controlling it will not just be billionaires, they will be the ones writing humanity's next chapter.